The confirmation of charges hearing in the Dominic Ongwen case started on Thursday, 21st January 2016 at the International Criminal Court in The Hague. On the 21st and 22nd January, Office of the Prosecutor presented documents, maps, and recordings of intercepted radio communications, videos, witness statements, and other evidence in support of the request to the Chamber to confirm the charges against Domenic Ongwen. Dominic Ongwen, alleged Brigade Commander of the Sinia Brigade of the Lord's Resistance Army, LRA, is charged with war crimes and crimes against humanity committed during attacks against the civilian population in Lukodi, Pajule, Odek and Abok IDP camps between October 2003 and June 2004. Murder, attempted murder, torture, cruel treatment and other inhumane acts, enslavement, outrages upon personal dignity, pillaging and destruction of property. Further, the prosecution alleges that from at least 1st July 2002 until 31st December 2005, Dominic Ongwen, Joseph Kony, and other Sinia Brigade commanders were part of a common plan to abduct women and girls in northern Uganda that were then used as forced wives and sex slaves, tortured, raped, and made to serve as domestic help, and to conscript and use children under the age of 15 to participate actively in hostilities. Confirmation of charges hearing continued with the presentations of the two teams of legal representative of victims on Friday 22nd and Monday 25th January 2016. Pre-trial Chamber 2 authorized 2,026 victims to participate in the proceedings. 1,434 victims are represented by Joseph Akwenyu Manoba and Francisco Cox, and 592 victims by Common Legal Representative Paulina Masida. Common Legal Representative of Victims Paulina Masida first addressed the court.
Mr. President, Your Honors, 30 years have elapsed since the inception of the atrocity perpetrated by the Lord Resistance Army in northern Uganda. Victims have been waiting for the proceedings to start before this court for 13 years. In the course of the years, they expressed a lot of frustration regarding the long-lasting non-execution of the warrants of arrest issued in 2005 against the most senior commanders of the LRA. Some victims also articulated a disbelief and loss of trust in the proceedings before this court. Some victims have died. Nonetheless, the transfer of Mr. Ongwen to the court has restarted a process of trust towards the court, and victims have expressed relief and hope to contribute to the search for the truth about the events at the origin of their victimization and to have finally their voice heard in these proceedings. For the absolute majority of victims, except a very limited number enjoying a dual status of victim and witness, the process of application for participation appears to be the only way to provide an account of their experience which might be of relevance for the search for the truth.
Jane Adong, legal representatives of the victims, gave a presentation on the historical and political context of the origin and the impact of the conflict on victims and the communities in northern Uganda.
Mr. President, Your Honors, the armed conflict between the government of Uganda and the Lord Resistance Army in northern Uganda, once described as the worst forgotten humanitarian crisis in the world, was one amongst many to affect post-independence Uganda, but was exceptionally protracted and brutal in its impact on the civilian population.
Paulina Masida then addressed some legal issues relevant to the victims in the case. She underlined which evidence of the victim's account of the event allegedly corroborates the prosecution case. Joseph Akwenyu Manoba and Francisco Cox presented views of the victims from 28 villages they consulted in January 2016. They addressed the impact that the crimes had on the victims and victims' views regarding the charges in this case and the expectations of the court.
Mr. President, Your Honors, victims want this chamber to know that abductions of children, engaging in hostilities, or killing them, as the LRA did, greatly affects the family and social fabric of the families whose children have been victimized as such. This is so because African children play an important role in the family setup. They assist their parents and other members of the community. This unique responsibility of the African child has been recognized by the African Charter on the Rights of a Child in Article 31. Your Honors, many victims speak of poverty and hunger as affecting them right up to date, more than 10 years after these attacks. These were the impacts on victims of the crimes committed by Dominic Ongwen.
Mr. Cox presented victims' views on the responsibility for crimes, particularly in view of his own forced recruitment as a child and on the scope of charges brought in the case.
Your Honors, when we met with the victim and we asked them, and I quote, "What do you expect of us as lawyers?" The main thing they repeated was, and I quote again, "Come back and tell us what has happened, be it good or bad news. We hope, after hearing the solid evidence presented by the prosecutor's office, that the ruling of Your Honors will be that there are substantial grounds for each one and all the charges brought against Dominic Ongwen, so we can bring back good news that the first stone for justice to be done has been put in place, and that, as they requested, this will never happen again to them as a guarantee of non-repetition. Therefore, Mr. President, Your Honor, we respectfully request that all charges be confirmed. Thank you."
Hearing continued with the presentation of the defense evidence.